Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Ralph Hassan. On behalf of our chapter, the Texas Tri-Cities chapter of NACD, we want to welcome you and thank you for being with us today. I understand we have NACD members from 31 states and Canada with us today. I learned about the book at the heart of today's session, Competing in the Age of AI, by our speaker, Kareem Lakhani, and his co-author, Marco Ianciti, from our other speaker today, Stephen Strauss. And when I read it, it opened my eyes to the ways in which AI will transform the economy and fundamentally change the modern American corporation. It certainly gave me food for thought about how AI will affect what directors do and what directors need to be learning and thinking about. Today, Kareem Lakhani is going to walk us through the key ideas in this book, and there are a lot of them, and they're big ideas. And then we'll have a conversation with Kareem and with our other speaker today, Stephen Strauss, and then we'll take your questions. Kareem and Stephen were both ahead of their time regarding AI, as we'll see and as we'll hear. I've learned a lot from them, and I look forward to learning more with you today. And with that, let's turn over to Kareem and let him get going.
Thanks, Ralph. Really appreciate the kind introduction. Thanks to Stephen also for all the kind words and the collaboration, and also, of course, to the NACD Tri-Cities chapter for making this possible, and of course, all of you for taking time from your busy schedules to be here with us for the next while as we talk about AI. So I'm going to just dive right in. I'm going to share my slides with you, and then we'll make these slides available for all of you as well. So no worries on that. So like you, I'm also a director. I just joined the board of Cloudflare, and I've been on the boards of other sort of smaller startups, but Cloudflare is a public company. 20% of the internet's traffic comes through our firewalls, and we provide a whole range of sort of cloud-ready services for all types of companies as well. And so let's dive in and first start with this notion of hype. There's a ton of hype about AI. And the way I want you to think about hype is in a very economic fashion. The hype is driven by two things. One is that there's the supply of AI has increased dramatically. There's lots of AI becoming available for all types of activities. The performance of this AI appears to increase exponentially. And then at the same time, the cost of the AI is also dropping radically as well. Like what it used to take us to do something with AI 6 months ago, 6 years ago, 10 years ago is very different than what it takes us today. So there's a supply shock. At the same time, there's a demand shock as well, because every problem is becoming an AI problem. Law is an AI problem. Medicine is an AI problem. Drug discovery is an AI problem. Consulting is an AI problem. Education, dentistry, driving, everything has become an AI problem. And that's why we're seeing all this hype. Supply shock and demand shock simultaneously driving this frenzy about what AI is, both for the good and also, of course, for the bad. And how do we make sense of this? So one is our friendly neighborhood hyperscalers are investing dramatically. Like this kind of capex in cloud companies seems ridiculous. But that's what we're seeing. I think Microsoft is projected to invest close to $90 billion in capex alone. This is a software company because of what's happening with AI. And so one thing I want you to sort of keep in mind is that we all as non-hyperscalers can benefit from these investments, because what these investments are yielding is this tremendous increase in performance, right? This exponential performance. Every 6 months, every 9 months, every year, every 18 months, there's some doubling of some metric that happens. And so it's quadratic or exponential. The math majors and us can argue about the exponent, but this is what we're sort of seeing. Now, the thing I want you to sort of keep in mind is that this increase in performance is not just about the bits and bytes. It's measured in bits and bytes and so forth, but it's really about something different. And I want us to sort of keep this in mind as we go forward. So you all look old enough to remember acoustic couplers and dial tone internet, right? The funny beeps you would do to get internet access in your homes. And then the modem speeds got better. And then, your cable provider provided you with cable modems. Then you got smartphones. And then you went from 1G to 2G to 3G to 4G to LTE to now 5G and blah, blah, blah. And so there was this improvement in technical performance over the last 30 years. And the translation of that to business benefit was there, but it took a while. Like, what is the benefit of doubling your internet speed? I don't know. We can probably figure that out over time, but it wasn't immediate. This technology is different because this is not just about flops and bits and so forth, or even the number of tokens being handled. It's really about what the argument I'll make is about expertise and the provision of expertise inside of your companies. And when you get a doubling in performance of AI models, it's a doubling of expertise becoming available to you and your organizations or to you individually. And that's the frame you need to be walking in with, that this technology is about expertise provision and capability provision that is very different from the prior generations of technology that we've had before. So again, in 2020, Marco and I wrote this book about competing in the age of AI. We were not talking about competing with AI. We weren't talking about AI bits and bytes. This is really a business book about strategy and leadership. And the idea being that the core of the enterprise is being transformed with data and algorithms and networks. And that's the argument we made. I graduated from my undergrad in the last century, like many of you. I worked at General Electric in the last century. And the GE of that time, Jack Welch's GE, was a member of at that time, is a very different company compared to the tech-first companies that we talk in our book. We talk about companies like Google and Tencent and Ant Group and so on and so forth that were built very differently. And the argument we made in the book is that AI is not about technology, but really about business architecture. And this is where you as board members matters, because you need to be thinking about business architecture for the boards you guys govern. And the business architecture has two components. There's a business model, how you create value and how you capture value. And then the operating model, which actually delivers the value to the business model. And that has implications for scale, scope, and learning, how you serve more customers, how you offer them many different things, and how do you keep improving. So this is where we saw AI mattering. AI was not about just the infrastructure, but it created new vectors for value creation, new vectors for value capture, and then, of course, new ways to scale value through your operating model. The example we use in the book to get it going was about Ant Financial, which was in many ways the PayPal for Alibaba, for eBay in China. Ant Financial grows to 1.2 billion customers in a very short amount of time with lots of products and services. But what the surprising thing about Ant Financial is that it's got only 12,000 employees at this level. 12,000 employees servicing 1.2 billion users. I think I've been lucky to be in the U.S. since 1997. I came here from Canada, from Toronto for my graduate school, stayed here. And it's been the same bank that's been acquired over and over and over again, consolidated and so forth. And my estimate was that for this bank to serve, it's one of the largest U.S. financial institutions, for this bank to serve 1.2 billion users, they probably need like 10 million employees or something, just in terms of scale, right? Versus the 12,000 employees here. The other thing they have, which is very interesting, is a very crazy metric, which is 310. They say that for any customer interaction inside of their organization, internally or externally, maximum 3 minutes. So 3 minutes maximum. 1 minute for any kind of approval needed for the customer transaction, and 0 human intervention. 310. Okay? Very ambitious target. So all of these products and services that they offer have to meet that metric. Now, there's no way they can meet this metric with just people at the core of the business. It has to be data and algorithms and AI driving this. So 310 is their mantra. I joke that my bank also has 310, but appears to me to be 3 months, 1 month, and 0 0 computers in the mix of it. And what I often tell directors is like, what's going to be your company's 310? What's the ambitious thing you can tell your management teams to think about that would be 310 like, that would drive performance and this kind of capability structure. So that's Ant Financial. And when we think about Ant Financial, what we saw was in the value creation, value capture side, they have 3 dimensions. They have product value, how good is the product or service that they're offering, things we all focus in on, the performance, features, reliability. But then also network value or ecosystem value, the value contributed by having them in an ecosystem where as more and more users come on board, as more and more suppliers come on board, the value of the product itself for each user also increases. And then also data value. How do you extract data from every single transaction that takes place in the company, and how does that make you smarter about the next interactions you have with your company? So these become the vectors of value, and they design their products and services, both the value creation, value capture, with all three dimensions at play: product value, network value, data value. Again, we walked through this in exhaustive ways inside the book. But then the operating model is also very interesting for a company like Ant. What we observe is that the data and algorithms are at the core of their business. So it's a platform with payments and credit and commerce and consumers, insurance. And the logic inside of the company is the more data, the better the algorithms. The better the algorithms, the better the service. The better the service, the more usage. The more usage, the more data, and that flywheel. And this flywheel is very important to unlock inside of companies. And more companies are getting there to start thinking about it in this way. The core of this company shifts from people to AI factory. Okay, so what we observed in our research was that the core of the organizations was this scalable analytics AI factory that was inside the organization. Now, many of the companies you guys serve on in the boards of or govern or manage also have AI operations. By now, many companies have AI operations and data science operations and so on and so forth. But my complaint with most of the ones that I see is that they seem to be not industrialized, but highly boutique, highly haute couture, right? And if I sort of take that haute couture example to its limit, right? If you want to go to Chanel and get a haute couture dress made or an outfit made, you first have to book an appointment. You first have to apply, right? And they may not think you are a suitable enough person to even apply to get an appointment, right? So let's say you apply and you get an appointment. It'll take you 6 months to get an appointment. Then you'll go there, spend a couple of days in Paris, and they'll measure you up. And then they'll say, come back in 6 months or 9 months, and we'll have this beautiful outfit created for you that you basically only wear once. And it seems to me that many data science operations and AI operations are like that. They're boutique-y, they're haute couture. It's very hard to get their time. They're very busy. They may not take you. It takes them a long time to produce something. And it's so fragile that after one wear, it collapses. We need to change the mindset in our companies from this boutique haute couture operations to one of an AI factory, which has a data pipeline at its core, algorithm development, infrastructure development. And in the end, what the AI factory does is that it creates three things at scales. That's predictions. Think of your company as a network of predictions being made: sales, marketing, finance, HR. Those are all prediction tasks being done. AI factories can help us with our predictions. AI factories help us with pattern recognition. Think about all the people that are focusing on pattern recognition inside of your organization. And then finally, process automation. And that's what the AI factory does. Those are the products that come out of the AI factory. Just like a McDonald's factory produces hamburgers, an AI factory produces predictions, pattern recognition, and process automation. And the operating model core is about data and software and APIs and applications. We still have a massive role for humans, but they're on the edges of the organization, running these things, making sure they're operating properly and so forth. And just to give you an example, like when you use a service like Uber, right, you don't call a dispatcher. It's all the algorithms doing the work on the back end. The humans are on the edges of Uber in making the company work, for example. And our thesis in our book was that basically you have a collision happening between most companies in America today are basically siloed organizations with product unit businesses, with their own IT, with their own data, stuck up in this way. And for good reason. Silos are good. They help us focus, help us get stuff done. We're not encumbered by large bureaucracies. We can just get things going. And basically the idea here is that that gets transformed into a software stack and a data stack that basically moves us into a platform model, and that creates this collision between firms that can grow exponentially and firms that grow sort of in this concave fashion. And we saw this in our book in terms of as you compare Pfizer versus Moderna, HSBC versus Ant Group, Ford, Tesla, Merit, Airbnb. This is not one about low-end disruption. This is about collision of how you run your organization. Um, there's a question about human in the loop. I think human in the loop is very important here. And there's a big question. We'll come back to this at the end because I think there's a range of elements to think about human in the loops and have a framework around that as well. Human in the loop, we should think about both AI in the loop, human in the loop, no AI, and also fully agentic systems. And I'll offer you a framework to think through that as well. Okay, so that was the book. That's what laid the book out. It came out again 2020. I was just talking to our publisher this morning. They were trying to convince me to write my second book, and I'm like, oh, okay, let's do it. But they said that I was very lucky. Our book has done really well and has been one of the best performers they've had on technology and business in the last 5 years, and it still is quite relevant, even though we didn't talk about generative AI at all in the book, because at that time, in 2020, the Gen AI tools were not ready. They were still very toy examples. They were very Fisher Price type models, but now they've gotten quite good. So let's just put this all into context of the current moment. Okay, the current moment, what we're seeing is we're basically skating off 70 years of AI. Okay. Starting up north here in Dartmouth, in New Hampshire, cybernetic systems being invented in the 1950s, then trained expert systems, then machine learning, what I call good learners, and now generative systems. Machine learning era was one about prediction, right? You could eliminate spam from your email. You could get good recommendations for music, for books, for movies, for travel direction, for friends, for all of you are trying to get LinkedIn connections. Those are all part of the prediction systems that the machine learning era built, that the AI factory built at scale. But they make predictions about some future state, some future action. Generative systems can take that same baseline technology and instead of making a prediction about something, create brand new content. So the way I talk about it is that predictive systems could help you identify cat versus dog, spam versus not spam. Generative systems can create the image of the dog, can create the image of the cat, or create the email for you that could either be viewed as spam or highly effective ways to get introductions done in an email environment. And so generative systems do that. They create new content of all types. But really what's needed right now for us in many ways is to move away from just wholesale adoption of generative AI, but to actually be thinking about this in terms of clinical trials. And this is what I've been doing on my research side. We've been basically saying Gen AI is this new drug that's being introduced in our economy. We don't know the right dose. We don't know efficacy. We don't know side effects. We don't know dosage. We don't know the right diet you should be following, the toxicity you have, and all that kind of stuff. And so we need to come in and do these types of randomized controlled trials to help make sense of that. So let me tell you a bit about these RCTs, these randomized controlled trials, and what we're finding, and then what this implies for you all as directors. The first is a study we did at Boston Consulting Group, where we were looking at basically our graduates from the top elite MBA programs and PhD programs when they work at BCG. And what we're trying to understand is like, how do these folks work with AI in their jobs? And here's what we discovered. We discovered that Gen AI lies on this jagged frontier. It's a jagged technology, which means it can dramatically improve outcomes in one direction when it's inside the frontier, but if the technology is being used for things that are outside this frontier, unknowingly, it can drastically reduce performance. We did this as a clinical trial, so we have 750 BCG consultants working with us for the full day. We randomized them into two types of tasks. There was one around inside the frontier, and this task was about new product development, creativity, analytical skills, persuasiveness, writing skills. And then we had a task that was really about a case study task focused in on analyzing data, analyzing the spreadsheet, understanding the nuances in interviews, and then coming up with a recommendation. So there was a right answer in the bottom task, and there was basically a creative answer in the top task. For the creative stuff, we saw something incredible. And I'm still blown away by this. The study is now 2 years old, and I'm still blown away by these numbers. So remember, our group are high elite MBAs, right? They graduate from Harvard, Wharton, Stanford, INSEAD, and so on and so forth. NYU, so on and so forth. And what you see is the blue curve is a control curve. The red and green are the treated curves. And what you see is this shift to the right of the distribution of performance. 12% more tasks got done. They were 25% faster and 40% higher quality results in our analysis of the tasks that they did for us, right? And the shift is dramatic. Basically, if you had no AI and you were of median ability, having AI pushed you to the 95th percentile in an already elite group. So this shift has been quite dramatic for us. At the same time, when you use AI for what it can't do, and the problem is people do it, right? Your performance will drop, of course, by definition. But to see it in action and how dramatic it was here. So what you see in this spreadsheet analysis task, which 2 years ago the OpenAI models could not do, now they can. They actually set up a secondary Python interpreter for you when they analyze the data using a deterministic machine and then bring back the results. It couldn't do that, but it would still try to analyze the data for you. And what we discovered is that 85% of the people in the control condition got the answer right. There was a right answer, but only 60% to 70% of the people in the treated conditions of GenAI got the answer wrong. Right, so the 20% decline in performance with AI, and so I did a little video about this. I'm going to show this to you about how to think about this jagged nature of the technology. Let me just play that. I think I've got the audio turned on.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today I want to discuss a phenomenon I like to call falling asleep at the wheel. This term refers to a scenario where people become overly reliant on AI systems, leading to worse quality work and inaccuracies. In my laboratory for innovation sciences, Fabrizio Del Acqua produced a study called Falling Asleep at the Wheel. He found that as AI quality increases, humans are less likely to engage actively in the task. In other words, the better the AI, the more people tend to trust it blindly and reduce their oversight. This often leads to a paradox where high-performing AI can result in worse overall performance because humans are falling asleep at the wheel. I also led a large-scale experiment at Boston Consulting Group that found a similar phenomenon. Here, the consultants trusted the AI's outputs more because of its perceived high quality. However, this trust was misplaced, and they ended up producing incorrect and misleading results because they didn't scrutinize the AI's output thoroughly. Always keep your critical thinking hat on and don't fall into the trap of blindly trusting AI. It's your responsibility to ensure that the AI is aiding, not replacing your judgment.
Right. So I think this falling asleep at the wheel risk is real, and part of your governance needs to be, the issue right now is that mostly the tech organization is responsible for AI, but it actually has to be the business units. The business units actually need to do the AI evaluation to make sure that the tasks are being enhanced and we're not getting this falling asleep at the wheel response. And so I think this is part of the shift to think of AI not as a technology about bits and bytes and about speed and performance, but about work, about expertise. And so should your CIO and CHRO be joined at the hip, right? And should they actually be the same person? Should they be, or a new hybrid role is created? Or how does that actually then interact with the business unit? These are all questions that I think all of us will be facing as we go forward. By the way, this is not me talking. This is my bot, right? This is an avatar of mine. You'll see I look very sleepy. My team sort of ambushed me one morning. They said, stand by the elevator doors and just talk about what you had for breakfast. I hadn't had coffee yet, but they recorded me anyway. And this is the Hanzi Kareem. And the whole script was made by AI. And this is my avatar talking. I didn't say a single word here. And then more recently, with better models, I'm now able to speak, fluent Chinese.
大家好，我是 Karim Lakhani， 哈佛商学院教授，研究领域为创新、技术管理、数字化转型和人工智能。2022年11月 ChatGPT 的发布，大家好，
AI party tricks. But what's interesting here is that, again, this is now $30 a month. You can record yourself talking and with the right intonation, speaking any language you want. And our online team has now used these avatars now to actually build a whole bunch of new content that we can scale very quickly in terms of our learnings. So now let's move. So before I've talked about the impact on individuals, let me push to bringing us to shift into teams, because that's where most of the work happens inside of organizations. This was a study with Procter & Gamble. Again, we partner very closely with these organizations to do the work. With P&G, the big headline is that AI is transforming from a tool to a teammate. And what do teams provide you? Teams provide you with performance. Working teams yields better outcomes than working on your own, provide you with complementary expertise, and provide you with sociality. And here's what we discovered. We set this up as an experiment inside of these 4 different business units at P&G. We set this up as team without AI and team with AI, but also an individual contributor with AI and without AI. The teams were a combination of an R&D and commercial folks. Here's what we discovered. First, on the performance side, an individual with AI performed just as well as a team without AI. Okay? And this is important to note, right? And you sort of see that very clearly in this yellow bar as compared to the team no AI. Even though the bars are higher, there's no statistical significant difference between these two. And then teams with AI, although on average were similar to teams, individuals with AI, what's interesting is the teams with AI produce the best, highest quality ideas. Okay? So the top 10% of ideas that we evaluated mostly came from the teams with AI. So both there's an average effect and what we call an extreme value effect when it comes to AI. Now, what you should be thinking about though here is that, any of you that are CFOs or former CFOs, it's like, okay, great, individual with no AI, all of a sudden I can cut costs by 50%. Like, why do I have all these teams running around doing this thing? We should just give everybody an AI agent and do that. So of course, that's going to be a natural reaction. And certainly for a bunch of tasks, that might be the outcome. But if you care about extreme value and high innovation outcomes, you would still want to put teams with AI in here. So it's worth thinking through that. Secondly, we see this expertise effect. So I'm going to just explain to you these 2 graphs because there's a little bit of detail and nuance here. On the left panel, what you see is the individual with no AI working away, and the x-axis measures the technicality of the solution, right? These are engineers and commercial people coming up with new product ideas for P&G. And as you would expect, the R&D people who are yellow skew to the right, so they have more technical solutions, and the commercial people skew to the left because they have more less technical solutions. Makes sense. These are individuals with no AI. But the individual with AI basically overcomes this bias and creates balanced solutions. And these balanced solutions look just like the solutions that are produced by teams at Procter & Gamble. Okay? So the missing expertise is available. So individuals plus AI produce more balanced ideas that were similar to teams. And then secondly, the other effect was that in our 758 people, 800 people that we have in this study, what we discovered is that there were some people that had lots of experience with new product development and some that had a little bit of experience with new product development. Well, now that experience deficit goes away. It helps the people without that missing expertise to come through. So again, if you think about job design, team design, how does an R&D function now go to market faster by having access to these bots? Those become big, big questions for us. And this study was commissioned by the head of R&D for Procter & Gamble, Victor Aguilar, because he was focused on saying, right now, the interface between R&D and marketing is too fraud, takes too long, and so on and so forth. I just want to push my teams to go further and faster. To push this through. And the third bit is that humans with AI, we found more positive emotions and negative and fewer negative emotions in using those tools as well. So now, what does this mean for all of this? What we're observing is that the AI models are improving exponentially. Okay. but companies are absorbing linearly. And this is creating a big problem. Because if this is a story about expertise, and expertise is doubling every 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, 18 months, but you're only absorbing this in a linear fashion, you'll just be in a deficit compared to your competitors who might be adopting this faster. And the adoption is not the similar adoption worlds of the internet era that we had, right? Or the mobile phone era. Remember, you guys all went through decisions about, should we have mobile phones for our employees? Should we have internet for our employees? Should we allow browsers for our employees? Should we have Wi-Fi for our employees? Those were all board level decisions. But those were, in the end, not consequential to the nature of work being done. People adapted and used those tools. And if you waited a year or 2 years, you were fine. Here, this matters because what's going on is that this is about expertise. So you're missing out on the expertise. And when you have new expertise becoming available, it should change your work process. And the work process change is what I think most people are missing here. So how should you be thinking about AI? First is what I want you to sort of have a perspective on is that the AI is lowering the cost of some key input. And as I've hinted, AI is lowering the cost of expertise. But it's similar to the last 30 years of the internet and mobile era, right? The browser lowered the cost of information transmission, consumption, and production, right, to zero. This meeting we're having right now with 170 people, right, 30 years ago, pre-internet, would require us to have met either in person, so fly ourselves down to Austin or wherever, right, and have the meeting. Or we could do this on broadcast, but each of us would need a camera operator, a sound person, and a satellite truck. And it would cost us $10,000 per minute per person to be able to pull that off. Now, you don't think twice about joining a Zoom room because the internet lowered the marginal cost of information transmission and lowered the marginal cost of information consumption. And then we lived in a world of information glut, and Google and Baidu provide us now with search engines to find the right information. Napster. Some of you still may have some illegal music in your hard drives. What Napster did is it showed us what would happen when the song got unbundled from the album and delivery became online. Steve Jobs comes in with a new business model. The new business model makes him charge 30% of all music revenues. And then Spotify comes in with the subscription model. iOS and Android showed us what would happen in a cloud-first environment for software development, lowered the cost of software development and distribution. Remember, you would go to Sears and buy software in boxes and get paper cuts. And now you just download it online, and then you get massive innovation on TikTok. So the question we've been asking is, what is AI reducing the cost of? And for us, AI is reducing the cost of expertise. And remember, companies are just bundles of expertise. I've given you empirical RCT level evidence about the expertise cost reduction. It's giving us this kind of expertise cost reduction. And if companies are just bundles of expertise and that cost is declining, then all of a sudden we're a brand new game. So the framework that I want you to have is imagine just a Gaussian distribution, a normal distribution of expertise. We want people in the right tail in our companies, but typically we get a normal distribution. And then with AI, what happens is that the left tail will get cut off. Because if you know how to use the AI, you will be at the average of the AI and will extend further down. And the question becomes, what happens to the folks that are on the right tail and the left tail of the human distribution? How do we think about that? How do we bring this in? What does this mean for our workers and our organization? There will be replacement. You all need to spin up with it. Like some jobs will go away, should go away. Mary Erdos at JP Morgan says, eliminate the no joy work, get rid of that and transform the jobs. So we see replacement, we're going to see augmentation. You have new capabilities in jobs for people, the Iron Man suit for knowledge workers. And then the transformation, new roles will get created, new positions will get created, new things will be redefined. And I think it's our responsibility as board members to get our management teams to think a lot about augmentation and transformation. Yes, replacement will happen, but their promise to their companies and to their associates needs to be about, we're going to help you navigate through this era, give you the skills and capabilities where you may have a job with us or somewhere else. But that this world is showing up in our doorsteps. We imagine a world where basically every person gets empowered by agents, by AI agents. that's already happening. Those of us that are on the leading edge of using AI, I've got a whole bunch of agents that do very specific tasks for me. But also it could be a world where agents become bosses as well. And the Uber example I gave you is one where the algorithm is the boss, right? The algorithm hires people, the algorithm allocates tasks to people, it rewards people, it pays people, it fires people, it does all that. Oftentimes when I'm in large company settings, I'll say, okay, everybody close their eyes, and then say, raise your hand if you don't like your boss. About 50% of the people raise their hands, they don't like their boss. Okay, good. How many of you want an agent boss? Yes, because my boss will be as capricious, won't be as mercurial, will be more fair, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. So I think this world is coming to our companies now. Our view is that you as board members need to think about AI's impact on operations, on the organization, and also on the strategy. The strategy function now needs to not just consider you and your competitor, but also you with AI compared to where the AI is itself. Okay? Because the AI capabilities are improving every 6 months, every 9 months, every 12 months. And the strategic questions your company needs to ask itself is what can actually now be done by AI that we don't need to do anymore? And really own it and make it happen. What are you uniquely good at? And what do you need to evolve to stay ahead of the AI? And finally, what new opportunities are possible and how do we capture them? Now, I just want to end with this view. There's a leadership playbook for AI that I think is important for all of you to follow as well. And we've had experience with all these companies in making this happen. First is you got to learn about AI. And it's not about AI and the bits and bytes, which is where I think most of the education goes to. It needs to be about what AI means for business. And this one framework that I offer you is about expertise. And you need to take that seriously to say, what does it mean if this is really an expertise shock? And how do we think about that for business? What does this mean for our business model and our operating model? The second thing I want you to do is that you all need to get good at using AI yourself, personally. Doing AI. Because if it's about expertise, then you don't want somebody else to build your AI tools. You need to build your own agents because you know your expertise the best and you want to augment it the best. So what I say to board directors, for CEOs and so forth is AI will be done by you, not for you. You have to do the AI, which requires you to do the damn work. Sorry, excuse my French. So doing is important. Then you got to do imagining, right? Once you can learn and do, then you will know what are the new operating and business models. It won't just be slideware. You will have had experience in building these tools so you can really imagine what it takes. Then it's all about change and change management. This is, to be up on that curve, you need to be continuously be changing because new expertise comes in, you continue changing the work processes. So how do you build change resilience and change skills for everyone? And the last bit is caring. People are worried about their jobs. People are scared about their careers. And am I doing all this AI work to train the bot to take over my job? So you really have to take this view about caring and what does it mean to belong to this company that is going to transform using AI, but what happens to them? And I can tell you AI fails at the front lines if you don't pay attention. So with that, I'll stop and then we can have a conversation.
Karim, thank you so much for walking us through not just the key ideas in the book, but this beautiful research you've done since, which is so impressive. The idea of clinical trials to help us understand what we're dealing with here and how we can use it. So powerful. Thank you. Let's rope Stephen in at this point. So Stephen, at the beginning of this thing, I said that both of you were ahead of the curve regarding AI, and you were. I'd like to hear from you. We'd like to hear from you about your experience as a general partner with Austin Ventures and how that led to the insight that led to the founding of Kung Fu AI, if you would.
Thank you, Ralph. And Karim, I just want to echo what Ralph said. That was a tour de force. And I loved your book, and the work that you presented since then has been amazing.
Thank you.
So, yeah, Karim, it does seem like you and I were both ahead of the curve. I started thinking about my company in 2016 and started it in 2017. And at the time, I convinced myself, basically based on pattern matching, that AI was going to be the technology that would deeply change the basis of competition, and started my services firm at that time. It came from the front row seat I had to the internet revolution, being at a venture firm from '96 when I graduated from HBS, and was there from '96 to '04. So exactly the .com era. Ralph, I'm not exactly sure how I got that conviction. As I said, I think it was based on pattern matching, but I want to share one pattern that I have seen right now that I think might help put things in context for all the directors on the call. I see a deep parallel from a budget cycle point of view between Netscape going public in '95 and the launch of ChatGPT in 2022. So in 1995, and for those who have maybe as much gray hair as I do, or maybe more, Netscape went public in August of '95, and I think it took a while for people to really understand that there was something going on. How did this couple-year-old company have a $2 billion market cap? And it was too late for the '96 budget cycle. But 1997 felt like it was the first year that some companies had internet-related budgets. And by '98, it felt like most companies had internet-related budgets. In '99, that companies were doubling and tripling down. And for those, again, of a certain age, we all remember '99 as going into the peak of the .com hype, leading up to the peak. If you take a look at the budget cycles relative to ChatGPT, which was announced on November 30th of 22, it was way too late for the budget cycle of 23, 2 years ago, for people to really understand what was going on. And so in my view, last year was the first year that companies really had AI-related budgets outside of the few that were far ahead. And so that really maps to 1997. And if that's the case, this year is the company, from my perspective, that feels like most companies have AI-related budgets, which maps to 1998. Therefore, next year, the budget cycle that everyone's working on will map to 1999, where most companies started doubling and tripling down on their internet-related investments. And I think that's what we're probably going to see next year from a budget cycle point of view. And, it's anyone's guess what happens in the equivalent of 2000, which would be 2027. But there's already inflated expectations and valuations out there. So we might expect a correction at some point.
Okay. Kareem, where you described in other settings this transformation as inevitable. And I'm just so curious, you're out every day working with companies and directors and boards and executives all over the place. You're deeply engaged with them. How do you see this unfolding and on what timeline? Just thinking of the companies you interact with now, where are companies in terms of this transformation? How and when do they get there?
I think, in January, as the new year turned, I saw a post on LinkedIn by Doug McMillon, the CEO of Walmart, where he listed his top, books he read in 2024. And fortunately, our book was on there. And I was going to write a snarky remark, thank you, but you should have read this 4 years ago when it came out. So look, I think my sense is that there are three things here. First is, especially with generative AI now, because this is like the browser moment. Like now all of a sudden we have commoditized and democratized what AI tools can do, and that we can all do AI. Most people are the starting blocks. But unfortunately, most companies are seeing this as a technology enabler, not a work enabler, not a one-on-work transformation. So I think there's a big gap there. And the gap exists because the CEO and the C-suite aren't actually engaging with these tools as they should. So there's a big gap there. Secondly, I think my worry is that there is going to be, just as there was a digital divide amongst citizens in the 80s and 90s and 2000s, there's going to be AI divide with the companies, those that get it and those that don't. And that's going to be a function of both you all as board members and the management teams that you guys are governing and sponsoring. So I think, and I really feel this. And the reason why I'm worried about this is because of just the exponential nature of the technology. Because it's now not about the technology group bring the technology in. This is about marketing changing its workflow. It's about legal changing its workflow. It's about how you interact with customers in a different way. And so that requires wholesale flexibility in being able to change and continue to change. Miki Mikitani, who's the CEO of Rakuten in Japan, says, we need to build change fitness. I call it change resilience to do that. So I think that's missing. The third bit is more good news. There's some proverb in some ancient culture that said, like, when is the best time to plant a tree? Right? And the answer is like 20 years ago. The best time to plant a tree is always 20 years ago. When's the next best time to plant a tree? Well, it's today, right? You can start today. And so I think in many ways, I feel like everybody's the same starting gate. And what it requires is commitment by the boards and by management teams to say, we're going to do this. And it's not for the sake of AI. I have to keep reminding you that it's not for the sake of AI. You don't want to be AI first. You want to think about your mission and how AI helps you meet that mission and have a more ambitious mission. Not that the objective is to bring AI into your organization. And I think when you make it a technology play, it's about becoming AI first. And it's like, no, it needs to be about the mission and driving the mission to come through.
Stephen, I want to build on what Kareem just said with two questions for you that are related. So we just asked Kareem, where are companies in this transformation? Your company is out there every day working with companies as an advisor. Where are the directors and boards you interact with in terms of this transformation? How far along are they? Where are they headed? What are they doing in this area? And secondly, I've heard you talk about how important you see corporate governance in relation to responsible, ethical AI. So I'd like you to talk about those two things. Where are directors and boards you interact with today in terms of this transformation and the importance of corporate governance?
Yeah, thank you, Ralph. The answer to your first question is, and I hope this comes across as being hopeful for the directors on the call, to the extent you're feeling like you might be behind, I would tell you that you are not. It is my experience that almost all directors that we have been, working with and interacting with are very early in their journey, even if they, and many have not even started. And when we give people, safe forums, they tell us, thank you for giving us a place where we can be vulnerable to say, I don't know what I'm doing. I need help. What do I do next? And so, again, I hope that's a hopeful comment to everyone on this call, to the extent you're feeling some imposter syndrome or some, fear that you might be being left behind. I would tell you that you're not. But I do think that, there are people who will be moving ahead and are. I would encourage you to get over any worry about how you might come across. That would be a piece of advice, which is, be willing to be vulnerable and say, you don't know where to start, you need help, etc. Ralph, to your second point, the way I think about this is every technology ever invented by people has been used for good or ill. That goes back to the very beginning. So take fire. So fire has been used for arson, and it also, is used to cook food and to heat our homes. Every technology has been used for good or ill. I believe that we will look back and see AI as potentially the most powerful technology ever invented by people. And therefore, as it's used for good and ill, it's going to be, very extreme. And so I am, deeply invested in trying to make a future that we all want to live in for our kids and our grandkids. And I see only 3 guardrails as it relates to this future. The first is personal values. It's the personal values of everybody, everyone on this call, all directors, everyone in every team that we're on. We all really need to be very focused on our personal values. The second guardrail I see is policy. But I'm not very confident about policy being able to keep up with any technology, let alone this technology, which is moving very fast and also has so much money associated with it. I think that doesn't give me a lot of confidence. And the third guardrail, and the one I am hoping for the most, is corporate governance. I think it is all of our jobs to make sure that this technology is used responsibly. I think our future and the future of our kids and grandkids depends on it. And when people ask me, what are you most worried about in the future about AI as it relates to society? I say, I already see dramatic damage from AI today. As an example, I think that algorithms in AI are largely responsible for the degradation of our democracy today. Social media algorithms. When I look at the state of our kids' mental health, suicide rate among young girls, et cetera, and I have 3 girls and a boy, and their mental health is definitely challenged by social media. I put that at the feet of algorithms of AI, and therefore I put it at the corporate governance of the organizations in the social media space, among others. And so, again, it's all of our responsibility. That's my perspective, and it is something I'm deeply passionate about. So, Ralph, thank you for asking me that question.
If I may add to what Stephen is saying, I just double down on his last comments because I think it's really important. I really think that in this era, the rate and direction of AI and its adoption and its use is dependent upon you all as leaders, because you will be making those choices along the way. Ozge asked me a question in the chat about, the cybernetic teammate example. How should we think about AI augmentation around critical decisions? Well, those are choices that you all need to make yourselves. I have a small framework around that, but ultimately, instead of being passive users of the technology, which what we did in the social media era, we didn't do the clinical trials we were saying that are needed to be done now in the social media era. I think in this era, especially for work, you have to take the responsibility to set the rate and direction. Now, the governance framework happens, but what I saw many governors do is they stop the work instead of thinking about this as a portfolio. There are risks and benefits. You need to assess the risks and benefits and then go where the benefits are, maximize the benefits and eliminate the risks. Because most directors couldn't even spell AI, they just said shut it down or don't go after it. And so I think this is what needs to change. And I think it's our generation of leaders that needs to insert ourselves in these conversations and then also impact the rate and direction of the AI development as it happens, because we'll be creating the demand signals for these companies.
Thank you both. This is powerful stuff. I want to move to questions from our participants in a minute, but I'm going to close with one question, compressing 2 questions, and ask you for quick answers. So, Kareem, you are now subjecting all MBA students to a mandatory course on data science and AI for leaders, which is a beautiful thing. And it ties in directly with recommendations in the 2024 NACD Blue Ribbon Commission Report on Technology Leadership in the Boardroom. So if you can give us a quick answer on what do directors need to be doing and companies and boards need to be doing to develop director proficiency training. And this also ties in, I think, to your comments about a learning imperative for continuous learning. What needs to be done to enhance director proficiency and integrate director proficiency into selection and evaluation of directors? And Stephen, same for you. Kareem's done.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just flash back this slide. I think the curriculum has to be all of this, right? You've got to learn about AI, what it means for business. I often tell corporates, HR people, like they have learning and development organizations. In the era of AI, it has to be learning and doing organizations, right? They have to actually, learning has to be tied to doing. Got to do the AI, build the tools. And what's happened is that you can now, in plain English, build your AI bots and do these things. So doing is important. And then immediately then open up your minds about imagination. Once you do the learning and doing, it's about the imagination, building proficiency is about change and change management. Most change programs fail. Most change programs don't. And because what happens is we anticipate too long for the change. We think change is difficult. I was talking to Hubert Joly, former CEO of Best Buy. He's a senior lecturer here at HBS. He's got this great book, Straight from the Heart, about change at Best Buy, right? And he goes, maximum 2 years. 2 years, that's too much for change and change management. Same thing at Rakuten. And so what I would say is that the change side is something that you all need to get comfortable with, but you now need to push to your management teams and get the management teams to also accelerate change programs. It's uncomfortable, we know, for change. And we just have to build this change resilience thing. And then again, I don't want to ignore the caring bit that we have talked about quite a bit.
Stephen, same question for you. What do we do to enhance director proficiency and to build it into board recruitment and director evaluation?
Yeah, it's a great question, Ralph. Building on my comment about guardrails as it relates to AI, we have worked with the NACD to develop their first board AI governance training. We held the first cohort in August, and the next cohort is going to start in November. And I recommend it to all directors. And the content of that is strategy, governance, and value. So it's helping board members understand what AI strategy looks like, frameworks for AI governance, and then how do you think about value. And I want to pick up on what Kareem said, and there's been some in the chat as well, which is boards traditionally have I think rightly spent a lot of time focused on risk and risk management. But in the age of AI, that is incredibly important, to my earlier point about guardrails. But I think it is also critical for board members to lean into the enablement of AI, because the risk of not moving forward is to miss the boat. As I said, I came to believe that back in 2016 and 2017 that AI was going to fundamentally change the basis of competition, forever. And Kareem's book, outlines just very eloquently how that has happened and is happening. And so there's a lot of responsibility in the form of boards for governance of this, both from a risk and an enabling point of view.
Okay. We have some great questions from our participants. Let's try to get through a few if we can. How can organizations maintain strategic focus on their core purpose while building AI ROI models that drive competitive advantage without compromising sustainability commitments?
So I think there was a broader question also about sustainability. I mean, I think we need to sort of think about this in several perspectives, and let me offer you two. One is, this feels to me like 1913, right? Ford Model T was invented in 1908, right? At the time it was invented, there was no street lights, there were no stoplights, there were no regulations for seat belts, nothing like that, right? There were no mechanics, there was no gas stations. All that infrastructure had to be built to support it. And if you did a straight line projection of how big an engine you would need in 2020, say in the Ford F-150, which was 650 horsepower versus the 8 horsepower engine, you say, I need an engine the size of a Detroit city block to be able to run the F-150 in 2020. But there's 100 years of engineering that happened. And so I think we're just at the stage of this moving out of the lab into the engineering space. And we're getting more efficient with algorithms. We're getting more efficient with data, more efficient with our data centers and so forth. So that's happening. And so the second part of my answer is that the overall global footprint of energy usage in data centers, including all of AI data centers, is less than 2%. Right? Cars, shipping. Airlines take way more energy. So when people get to me like saying, what about the energy? I'm like, stop driving your car, right? Or switch to an electric car. That might have a bigger impact than trying to compromise on AI. And the AI usage is increasing, so per unit the cost is decreasing, but the increase, there's a lot of increase. So we will see this 2% increase for sure. But I think people misplace and overly index on the sustainability, at least in the energy side of things, or on AI, when there's much bigger things for us to go after. In that sense, if I heard the question correctly.
Yeah. Stephen, anything to add on that one?
Yeah, I just want to build on what Kareem said. And I would add that I really feel like it's NVIDIA that's going to be largely contributing to sustainability, because it's the power consumption of chips at the heart of all this that that is currently driving the projections of electricity consumption. And I agree completely. NVIDIA has not been focused on the power consumption of their chips as it relates to AI and data centers for long enough to really see progress, but undoubtedly they are working on it. But I do, it really bugs me when I see super trivial uses of AI, because I do know that we are, crisping the planet for the use of it, and it just as on an individual level, it bothers me when I see that. But I do agree that things will get more efficient over time.
Well, here is a more specific question for sure. Financial analysis is a use case. Finance demands rigor and precision. Hidden errors can have dire consequences. Is AI up to that task? How do you manage it to tasks it can handle?
Yeah. Look, 2 years ago, it wasn't up to the task. Now it is, because what's happened is that we have shifted so there are two different computing paradigms. The computing paradigms we all grew up in until 2017 was a deterministic paradigm, right? Where basically 2 + 2 always equal 4 in your Excel spreadsheet. Generative AI in particular, but AI in general is a probabilistic model, right? It gives you a probability of the answer with some error bars around it. And so when the model basically gives you an answer, you should say it's in some probability distribution of accuracy. Okay. And now you can turn up or down the temperature of these models to give you more or less things. But by default, these probabilistic models and these large language models and large image models were not designed, are not capable of doing deterministic calculations. And the breakthrough was, it's known as unhobbling. You connect these models to deterministic machines, like a Python interpreter. So what happens is if you now put a spreadsheet into ChatGPT or into Claude, right, and you say, give me a trend analysis, give me this or that, it takes your language, natural language, writes Python code, which is good at writing Python code, and then spins up a Python machine which interprets the data, does the analysis in a deterministic fashion, sends it back for interpretation. So what was a problem 3 years ago, 2 years ago, is no longer a problem now with these machines. But you need to know that your IT departments need to actually have that capability set up. I was talking to a very large pharma company, and their IT department had not turned that on yet. I'm like, this is like bad behavior by your, because, well, we don't know about data privacy. I'm like, those are all damn solved problems. Do your job. And because your users are going to start doing this and then get wrong answers, right? And so so that's the thing. And so in our course, we use this tool called Julius.ai, which is a Vibe data scientist. You upload data, and you can run very advanced models in plain English. Now, here's the thing: the trap you will fall yourself into is that you will start to believe the answers and do malfeasance statistically. Because even if you tell the model to run the regression, interpretation is going to be up to you, right? And understand what the limitations of that kind of analysis is going to be. So this is where you need to actually understand, if you're going to use it for this kind of advanced forecasting, build a REMA model, do all that kind of stuff, you actually need to understand how these models work. The machine will gladly run it for you and do all that kind of stuff for you. But you need to know, is this the right model for me to use here? Should I do something differently? How do I interpret that? And that's where the humans are not off the hook a bit matters.
Critical point. Yes. Check the work. Stephen, anything to add there? I
do. And again, building on what Kareem said, these capabilities in the hands of experts are very very powerful because they know how to direct them and then interpret and check them. And as Kareem pointed out on one of his slides, in the hands of people who are not experts, they can be dangerous. And so it is important to keep that in mind. I'd also want to point out that most of this conversation has been about generative AI capabilities, but there is a very broad toolbox called AI, and generative AI is one tool in one section of that toolbox. And there are a whole range of problems and opportunities for companies where generative AI is just, completely inappropriate, to apply it. And if you are not thinking about the full toolbox, you are really limiting, and if your company's not thinking about the full toolbox, you are really limiting your options and also potentially going to apply the wrong approach to the problem and get bad outcomes.
Okay, well, this is a question that kind of builds on this last one. It's interesting. You framed AI as reducing the cost of expertise. If expertise is no longer a bottleneck, what becomes the new scarcest resource in organizations, and how should boards prepare for that shift?
That's my PhD level class that I'm trying to figure out. No, I think it's a really good question, and that's actively my research agenda right now, to actually go say, if the whole basis for companies has been accumulation of expertise and having an advantage on some expertise, supply chain, marketing, manufacturing, you name it, science, you name it, discovery, you name it. And now all of a sudden, all of that is getting commoditized and becoming widely available. What is the new bottleneck? I think my speculation is the bottleneck is going to be adaptation of these tools, right? And designing new workflows to take advantage of these tools. And then the other discussion about hallucinations and falling asleep at the wheel and those kinds of things will matter.
Stephen,
but it's still to be TBD. I'm open to ideas.
Kareem, I actually thought about your book in relation to this, which is, building out data networks and business networks. Is a big moat for companies, and so I would point to Kareem's book for insights here. I also want to make. I feel like I'm right in the analogy business in this call, but I want to make an analogy back to the internet era. When the internet era started, we didn't have any role models for what it looked like to be an internet company. Everyone was really starting from the same point, but that is not the case today with AI. And Kareem, very articulately talked about Ant Financial, but Ant Financial, Google, Netflix, Amazon, et cetera, are examples of companies that are operating, what feels like light years ahead of almost every other company on the planet. And they are a role model for what AI organizations look like at scale. And Kareem's book really, talks about how data and algorithms, et cetera, are at the center of that with people around the outside. And that is very different from almost every other company that, that's out there. But those role models do exist. And so where it goes, I'm looking forward to seeing your research, Kareem, but I think your book provides a roadmap towards it.
Yeah, thank you.
How should a CEO engage with AI in their everyday work?
I mean, if you use your phone every day, you should be using AI every day. That's yes.
Yeah. Ralph, I'd say three things. One is use AI every day and try to increase your skills in using that. I would dedicate yourself to learning and take courses. The NACD director class that Jen posted the link for, Coursera has lots of courses on using this. And then I would dedicate at least 10 minutes a day, but probably not a ton more because there's so much hype out there. But a consistent read of what's going on at the forefront of AI, I think is something that would be really important for people to do.
How should we rethink competitive advantage of our rivals if AI capabilities are advancing every 6 months? Is the benchmark no longer the peers, but the pace of AI itself?
I think it's both the pace of AI itself and your competitors with AI. If you feel that they're getting ahead of you, then you're going to be in trouble because they can accelerate way faster than you will. And also, what new types of entrants are showing up.
Yeah, that's a good point, Kareem. We have not talked about AI native companies. If you think back to the internet era, Amazon was a very small company for quite some time, and companies like Barnes and Noble and Walmart didn't see it as a threat at all until it was. And so, I think it's very important to keep a focus on what's happening within your existing competitor base, but there will be new entrants. And I'll also give you a historical perspective, which is if we are in fact in the equivalent of 1998 today, as it relates to AI versus the internet, at that point in history in 1998, Mark Zuckerberg was in middle school. And so, your future competitor may, currently be going through puberty right now.
I've got questions. Our participants have questions, but I think we need to leave it here. I believe it's time to wrap up. What powerful and wonderful insights and learning for all of us. Thank you, Kareem. Thank you, Stephen. And thank you for everyone who joined us today.